Good morning, everyone. As always, what you're supposed to do, place your cross on first. No matter what's going on in your life, sometimes as Christians, we get to points where we feel like things ain't going the way we want them to go. And we're going to have those moments. But just remember, when you feel like that, call on the Most High God. He'll give you stability again in your mind. Because that's what we wrestle with the most, the thoughts that go through our head. One thing I had told somebody years ago, everything that you think ain't real. Well, they go hand in hand with the Bible. The Bible says test the spirits, whether or not they are of God or not. Well, that goes to internal warfare and external. People outside, you understand? Just pay attention. If you read this word and study this word, you wouldn't believe in things like intuition. That's like giving credit to yourself. No, spiritual guidance. Think about that. I thought that I knew I was right. No, you don't know nothing. You understand? The Lord helps you in so many different ways. And the devil try to tempt you in so many different ways. And you hear them birds singing this morning? That's what they do every morning. Every morning they do this. A beautiful noise. Every day you wake up, it's a time to get it right. To do better than you did yesterday. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Just really think about that last line. Next to the last line. Deliver us from evil. So you already know when Jesus taught us that prayer, he never intended for us to be partakers of evil or around it. Deliver us from evil. Think about that. Anyway, I'm going to continue reading from Exodus today. I'm going to start with chapter 2. Go with the flow. Whatever happens, happens. Whatever comes out, comes out. And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. Now just remember, it was a decree going on that all male children should be killed. Because Pharaoh saw that the children were rising up. That the Israelites was multiplying. You understand? During their affliction, they was multiplying. They were getting more than them. So think about this. There were more Israelites than Hebrews. And people, I know, like take slavery today, right? Not today, but 400 years ago or whatever. It was the same case. There were more than the people who put them in affliction. The taskmasters, there was more Africans than there were slave masters. History has a way of repeating itself. You understand? But the thing is, I don't care what nobody says. Just from history, I know it was God that delivered the Africans out of slavery. It's God that do it every time. No matter what race you are, it's always God that does it. Now, he uses people to do things, and you're going to see that today. And when she could no longer hide him, she took him for an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid it in the flags by the river's bank. I know most people like that would be so stupid. Let me tell you, right now, we don't go to the river banks to bathe or do none of those things like that. But back then, she put him somewhere where she knew he would be found. Same today. A lot of people abandon their children this day and age, and they put the child somewhere where he can be found. So it makes perfect sense. Now watch how you know that. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. So she knew what they would do. Think about it. It's not as miraculous as you may think. It was normal for women to go bathe in the river. So she did it purposefully for him to be found. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river. And her maidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child. And behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Now, she had compassion on him. Who had compassion on him? Read between the lines. Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. What are the odds? It was a setup. Come on now. If I go back, let me go back a little something, give you a backstory. Exodus chapter 1. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Shiphrah, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, "When you do the office of midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then you shall kill him. But if it be a daughter, then then she shall live." But the midwives feared God and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children. You see, if you pay attention, a lot of things that go on back then still go on today. A lot of people let other people take care of their children. Go back to slavery. A lot of the Africans that were enslaved took care of the children of the house. You'll see a lot of truth, a lot of things in here that's so similar that you can't deny it. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages." And the woman took the child and nursed it, her own child. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, "Because I drew him out of the water." Look at that name. Because I drew him out of the water. That's what it means. Now think about what Moses do. But I get to that in due time. And it came to that pass in those days when Moses was grown. Now, they even tell you there's a certain age when you're grown. I don't know how old he was, but when he was grown, that he went out into his brethren and looked on their burdens. So I know the movies never really tell you, the movies never say that Moses knew he was Hebrew. They always act like he didn't know. But you got to think about it. He was raised by his own mother. I'm sure she told him some stories. I'm sure she told him the truth. Read between the lines. Movies never tell the truth. Movies said Pharaoh had a vision that somebody was going to overthrow him. Let's see if that's true or not. And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens. And he spied an Egyptian smiting an Hebrew, one of his brethren. So he knew where he was. And he looked this way and that way. And when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Now, they say Moses was a murderer. Yesterday I talked about something called justifiable anger. Was that justifiable? Maybe, maybe not. But the thing is, we all make mistakes. We all do things. We take matters in our own hands. You see, Moses trying to save his people by his own hands. It didn't work out too well, but it worked out exactly how God wanted it to. And when he went out the second day, behold, two men of the Hebrews strolled together. And he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? Now think about Moses' behavior. Moses was executing judgment. Now what was Moses called to do? To tell people God's statutes and judgments and all those things. It was already in him to want to do the right thing, to intervene in situations. Now, one thing you're going to realize as you walk as a Christian, that some of your characteristics are there from birth. God just makes them better. Just remember that. Most of his characteristics was already there. And he said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Whether they knew it or not, he's about to be just that. Intendest thou to kill me, as thou killest the Egyptian? And Moses feared and said, surely this thing is known. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh, and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. Look, here it is again. Moses putting his nose somewhere where it don't belong. Or is he? Do you see the characteristics? Moses always step up when nobody else will. They were there. Now think about history. A lot of people have these drives in them. They want to fight for what is right. And Moses had those characteristics. And Moses was wondering, why did God choose him? These little verses right here can tell you why. But the thing is, he was already chosen. So who put those characteristics in him? And when they came to rule their father, he said, how is it that ye come so soon today? And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew under enough for us and watered the flock. Now look about this. Think about this now. They even mistook Moses for an Egyptian. That means the Egyptian and the Hebrews look similar. Or maybe when he fled, he had on Egyptian attire. Either way, they took him for an Egyptian. And it looked too different. It's a lot of hidden messages in here if you pay attention. But if you think about it today, a lot of Africans, a lot of black people don't know if they're Egyptian or Hebrew. They want to go back to Egypt, and they want to be a Hebrew Israelite at the same time. It really don't matter. He said to his daughters, where is he? Why is it that ye have left the man? Call him that he may eat bread. Look at that. Look at that favor. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his poor, his daughter. Look at that. Favor. He wasn't favored. He didn't start being favored after he realized he was working for God. He was favored before. Think about that. When you have purpose set on your life, God starts the process early. Real early, people. Now, I can tell you my testimony, but you have your own. You can look back on your life and see where God was putting his hand in the midst of things. And it was the same way with Moses. And she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom. For he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. Even that name means something. And it came to pass, like I looked up my name, even though it don't make sense. Hughes Town, oh, Lord have mercy. And it came to pass in process of time that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed by reason of bondage. And they cried, and their cry came up unto God by reason of bondage. What happened? They cried to who? They cried, and their cry came up to God. They didn't say he necessarily cried to God. They said they cried. God sees everything. He sees every group that is being mistreated, and he always does something about it. It might not happen right away, but think about it. Take the Africans that were sold into slavery by their own kind and by others. When they cried out, eventually what happened? They were set free. They were set free. Were they set free by their brethren? They were always set free by somebody internal who was there, who had a drive in them, right? Some was set in their heart, I got to do something about this. And you can say it was by this or that, but it was God. I don't care what you say. And God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God had respect unto them. Why did he look on the afflictions of the Hebrews and not on the Egyptians? First of all, the Egyptians were building statues and all kinds of things like that. They were mistreating people for no apparent reason because they thought they would grow stronger than them. And God saw this. But God saw it anyway. This was foreshadowed. It was foreshadowed ever since Abraham. God looks after his people. Who are his people? The people that call upon him. Now, they could have went other way. The Egyptians could have started calling on God, but they didn't. They called on their gods. One thing you're going to see in this Bible, that every civilization that exalted itself above God comes to ruin. Now, you can look at the history books. Aztecs, where are they now? Gone. Egyptians, all you can do is look at that pyramid that looks so great that it's not so great no more. Look at it. Just stone upon stone. And everybody's so amazed about this stuff. If they were so amazing of a people, they'll still be around. And Egypt would still be prospering, but it's not. Take the Aztecs. Same thing would go for them. If they were such a great and amazing people, they would still be around, but they are not. Every nation that exalted itself above God comes to ruin. Every person that exalted itself above God comes to ruin, one way or the other. But in this chapter right here, you can see the inner workings of God in Moses' life before he even knew what he was, even before he even knew what he was called to do. Does that make sense to you? But I can go back in my life, and you can go back in yours, and I can see growing up how God's hand was on me. And I didn't realize it until I gave my life to God, that God was always in the midst of the details. Because God said, I read this the other day in Luke about his chosen. The chosen see differently than others. And normally, when you're chosen, what that mean when you choose somebody? You're chosen to do something different than the rest. Take American Idol. When they choose that person, they become something different. They saw something in them that they didn't see in the others. So they give them a record deal to do all this other stuff. They push them forward. But when God chose you, he override all that. He got something way better than you for that. Something better for you to do. Let me pause and I will continue.